Welcome, everyone, to our latest episode of the Orchestration Kitchen as presented by Strata Identity. Today, we have a very special guest joining us as we talk about how to protect non-standard applications with CyberArk Identity. I'll be your host today, Mark Callahan. I'm part of the product marketing team here at Strata and joined, as always, with Chef Terry Kozard of our solutions engineering team. And today we have Kazar Sultan, who is the VP of Identity from CyberArk. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you guys. Terry and Mark, I've watched a bunch of these and I'm excited to be here.
We have a lot of fun with these. Sorry the chef's coat didn't make it in the mail. Next time, we got you covered. We'll get the jacket and the hat your way. Well, nevertheless, let's go ahead and get started about what we're going to discuss today and the topic of those really difficult to protect non-standard applications, those applications that weren't written to speak modern identity protocols. And as we think about that, let's take a quick look at the agenda for today's kitchen episode. So as always, we will start our conversation with just a quick, at a glance conversation around what identity orchestration is. We want to just sort of set that baseline for 2 minutes, and Chef Terry, I'll have you drive us through that, just so that we have a common understanding of what identity orchestration is. After that, Kazar, I'd love to have you talk a little bit about CyberArk Identity and where you all fit into the overall identity security ecosystem and how the identity security platform that you all have created is really helping your customers. And what's cool about this is our partnership together is very much one of a better together story, which we're going to dive into in the recipe whiteboard as we look at the way to modernize and protect those non-standard applications with CyberArk Identity. After that, just like any good cooking show, we're going to go from here's the recipe. We're actually going to cook with this. We're going to jump into the kitchen. There may be, a little bit of we're doing the live demo here. So it's very much going to be let's see this in action. And then, of course, throughout, we ask you to ask any questions you might have. So without further ado, I'd like to hand it over to you, Chef Terry, and tell us a little bit about what identity orchestration is.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mark. So simply put, identity orchestration is something you're hearing an awful lot in the industry. It seems to be the buzzword bingo of this season. I want to start with saying that when we talk about identity orchestration at Strata, we talk about it in a very different way than everybody else does. When we think of orchestrating identities, it's very simply put, when you want to take an application that's important to you that maybe was written before modern standards existed, how do you take full advantage of the latest, greatest security capabilities that exist, like CyberArk Identity? So this identity fabric allows you to abstract away all of the important identity services. And so you don't have to rewrite the application. You don't have any agents. You don't have to do any of that retiring of the technical debt. So we can modernize these applications very simply for the latest, greatest capabilities that exist through CyberArk. And so some of the examples of things that we do for our customers is we can add modern authentication. We're going to show you how we can easily overlay passwordless and SSO through CyberArk Identity into an application that previously was protected by Siteminder. But the same thing is true for MFA. The same thing is true for authorization decisions. If you want to add authorization engines that exist out there like OPA or Axiomatics or whatever it may be, the fabric will allow you to easily overlay that without changing the logic of your applications and things like that. But really what makes our version of identity orchestration unique is that we do the last millimeter integration. So we can easily partner with CyberArk so that we can make it simple and easy for you to do this anywhere. And so that's really the orchestration as we think about it.
So as you're looking at the right side of the screen here, I always sort of call out the fact that we don't want to bury the lead. What we're suggesting is that some of these really old non-standard applications, these legacy apps, may have been around in organizations for 20 some odd years. You don't have any access to the source code. Lord knows where it ever came from in the first place. What we're suggesting here is the fact that we don't actually have to touch the application to add CyberArk Identity to these apps.
That's exactly right, and that's the beauty of our marriage with CyberArk, and that we can make it easy for any of our mutual customers to take full advantage of your investment in CyberArk, which is a great opportunity because CyberArk already delivers tremendous value for their many customers out there. But all of them likely struggle with this exact challenge: is what about the old dust bunny applications, those that have been long enough to drink in most states in North America? And so now we have the ability to do that and do that at a level of simplicity that just previously wasn't available.
I dig it. Because again, what we're talking about here is a lot of times people don't expect that only, maybe it's 20 or 30% of their apps could take 150% of their time because they're so complicated. And today we're going to be looking at the fact that you probably think that they're stuck on Siteminder, that you can't get off of Siteminder, that you have to keep running Siteminder even though you have another modern IAM platform in front of it, because you have to do that to support these. What we're saying is you're not stuck. So today is very much a story of how do we get off of Siteminder? And, because as we were talking prior to this, CyberArk's PAM product needs no introduction whatsoever. It is universally known across the industry, but maybe you could walk us a little bit more into some of the newest identity offerings from CyberArk.
Yeah, absolutely. So first and foremost, like you said, CyberArk is most and well known for privileged access management. We've got like over 8,000 customers globally that are using like privileged access management and are using it to protect like their downstream like privilege targets and resources, right? Infrastructure, servers, RDP sessions into domain controllers and so on, like what you would expect privileged access to look like for your typical kind of like IT workforce or IT persona. Now, about 4 years ago, we also transitioned into talking about workforce access as a whole, like individuals like you and I that don't necessarily have like high levels of privilege, even though we may still have sensitive access and high risk access into like applications that we log into, but we're not traditionally privileged in the same way that you're logging into servers and infrastructure. So to protect the workforce user, CyberArk Identity is like what you would expect it to be. It includes capabilities like SSO, multi-factor authentication. It provides like a unified directory. It'll handle the life cycle of the user. It'll also provide the ability to like challenge smart authentication or strong authentication at the time of login. But what we've actually not been able to tackle with like our capabilities is, like you guys are saying, logging into these non-standard web apps. Because we have those 8,000 or so customers, we've been coming across these types of use cases a lot. Organizations that have legacy identity and access management solutions, and whether or not they're happy with them, they're basically using them a lot of times because they have to, but they don't get that extra layer of protection, such as the MFA, or the ability to look for behavior analytics, or the ability to go ahead and automate the life cycle. So the combining of things like the Strata technology and CyberArk Identity kind of completes the full set of capabilities needed to kind of move into a more modern kind of architecture for access management as a whole. So you've got the privilege access management covered, that's CyberArk PAM, and now you can kind of have a more of a holistic solution for the workforce side as well. So on this slide here, you're kind of seeing at the top, the blue arrow is covering kind of the overall access capabilities. And down below, we really leaned into, not only like lifecycle management, but what kind of governance for the organization should look like as a whole: access reviews, access certifications, compliance reporting, and like automation of like business operations in general. And there's a variety of capabilities beyond that. I've just kind of touched upon the surface here. In this like next slide, you can actually see that there's a variety of kind of core capabilities that we talk about, like the ones that you'd be familiar with: SSO, MFA, directory services. But then we lean heavily in on security policies and controls that go beyond the authentication. And actually, that's where I feel like the differentiation between using CyberArk Identity and something like our kind of nearby competitors would lie, is that post-authentication protection of the users. We'll talk more about that as kind of we go into the demo later on today, but that's kind of like a little bit of an overview of where CyberArk Identity lives.
Yeah, and just as a practitioner's perspective, engineers who might be in our audience, it really was impressive to me as I worked with the CyberArk Identity platform here, the richness of it and the capability, and honestly, the intuitive nature of it. It really does set itself apart from the other vendors that offer some of those services.
Well, as we're thinking about the recipe, and we actually have talked with a number of customers together about this as well. As we think about the recipe, Chef Terry, how would this play out? Because ours shared some of the capabilities that are available in CyberArk Identity, and as we're thinking to moving somebody off of that that legacy WAM provider they're currently stuck on. They just don't see a way off of it. We're actually suggesting that we might be able to do this in just a few minutes time, that we're not actually talking about refactoring the app and months of process and all the political machinations that go through trying to get the application team on board as well. We're suggesting that we can do this not only in a few minutes time, but we can do it at scale. We can do this across all of the legacy apps that a customer might have.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Mark, and that's really one of the great things to understand about our partnership with CyberArk is that here in a common architecture that as a user is trying to get access to a legacy application, and this may be the Siteminder kind of legacy, it may have its own login form and have an LDAP directory behind it. There's lots of different legacy applications. They've been around for a long, long time. But the idea here is for these types of applications, the identity fabric, this little orchestrator that we deploy in your environment, wherever that makes sense for you, it actually is directly integrated with CyberArk itself. So we integrate with CyberArk for all the privileged access management stuff that you're all very familiar with, as well as the workforce identity capabilities. So you can get passwordless, you can get single sign-on, you can get all kinds of adaptive logins and security controls before and after that authentication, and even use it in these legacy applications by the partnership between those. And as you said, Mark, we deploy in minutes, not months. So if you're already using CyberArk, it's a really light lift to then fully take advantage of all the benefits and investments you have with CyberArk to all of your key web applications, because that's exactly the place that Strata came to solve.
That's awesome. Well, Kazar, I always feel guilty about this as part of the kitchen. As with any identity demo, a good identity demo is a little bit like your favorite cooking show where they put the raw cookies in and literally in the same motion, they pull the baked ones out from the bottom of the oven because it's just that easy and that seamless. But nevertheless, bear with us. Let's go into a live demo if we can, Chef Terry, and just take a quick look at how this all plays together in practice.
Absolutely. And so we're going to show you the finished product here. So what this is this is a Siteminder based application that has previously been protected by Siteminder. And what's happened prior to the show is I just turned off the Siteminder agent. It really was kind of that easy. I went into whatever web server it was, I decommissioned the agent, and then you put the orchestrator somewhere in front of that. You may put it up network, you may put it on the web server, you get to decide. But the idea here is that now you have the ability to oh, I need to refresh my page here. Let me go ahead and jump out of that and refresh.
Great.
And again, to all of the great security capabilities with CyberArk is that they knew that I'd been on this page for a minute or two, and they
That's it. That's it.
So now what we did is we integrated with CyberArk. We'll show you exactly how all that happened. And we just put this orchestrator in front of it. And now CyberArk's doing all of its richness, all of its great security capabilities. Here we're now exposing passwordless with absolutely no effort. So I'm going to take my application on my phone, and now I'm going to use Face ID, and it lets me in. It's just that easy. There's not even a login experience. So now let me show you how all of this took place. So the what is pretty straightforward. Again, this deploys pretty darn quickly. But now let's show what it took to build all this. Here is the CyberArk Identity, Workforce Identity platform. And all I really had to do is create a new web app. Here we have several to choose from. As you might have noticed in my browser, this is Maverick 7, my demo environment. And all I had to do is create a relationship, a trust relationship between CyberArk Identity and the fabric. So in this case, if you're familiar with this already, you're just a metadata exchange between CyberArk and us so that they trust us, we trust them. And then that really is the whole level of integration between CyberArk and us. But there's a bit more on the Maverick side. Mavericks is the name of our orchestrator. So here, we actually just have 3 different steps for these legacy applications. The first one is do the parallel configuration with CyberArk. So from our perspective, we just traded that metadata back and forth. So we both know to trust each other and how to identify her and these other things. The next thing is tell us about the application that we're going to protect. In this case, this Canary application is a Siteminder-based application. So we're going to be a proxy. So we use our proxy application. And really, in order to protect this, all you need is what is the URL that we're sitting in front of. And then if there's particular protections you want on every given application or page rather, then you just define those here. Couldn't be simpler. And then you stitch those together in a user flow so that here we can take a look at the flow that we built. We've got the Canary application, and then we're just setting a very simple policy here. In order to get to this application, you have to go through Maverick 7. But the application previously knew who users were based on the things Siteminder did for them. In the way that Siteminder traditionally does that, and probably 95% of the time, is it creates what's called headers. Headers aren't hard to understand, but the idea is that they're not natively what modern platforms like CyberArk Identity just deal with, because these are old applications. And so what we do here is we just say, fantastic, the application's expecting headers, Strata gives them headers. The one that Siteminder uses starts with SM user, and we say, great, we're just going to give it the email that we got from CyberArk. Maybe they need first name, last name, department, who knows what. Adding new headers is just trivial. Give us the name of the header, where we find it, and then what attribute we want to pass that to the application for. So really could be simple. And this is why, Mark, when you said we deploy in minutes, it really is true. We turn off the Siteminder agent, build the configuration in CyberArk, build it in Strata, deploy it, and then you're ready to run.
Kazar, thank you for getting us set up as we were prior there as well, because as we look at the two UIs, it really is, everything was just a very simple configuration setup that we just did here to make this all possible. There was no magic behind the scenes. It was literally that.
Yeah, what I particularly loved about the Strata setup was that it uses all of kind of the modern standards along the way to then at the very end, leverage whatever method of authentication that you need. So as an example, between Strata and CyberArk Identity, there's OpenID Connect is being used as the standard of communication, which allows you to have very rich level of information exchanged between the two of us, right? Like I can put any information about the user from our directory, which our directory is then populated by your Active Directory or your LDAP or your Workday, like any HR source, right? So these are the things that, Strata wouldn't do natively, but CyberArk Identity can basically take that user data and handle the authentication, handle the policies, handle the controls, and then deliver into you in that payload, and then you guys can take it forward. Something that, it's kind of the best of both worlds, whereas, the strongest parts of CyberArk Identity were tackling those use cases, but delivering the headers and having kind of that customization and having that knowledge about what these downstream legacy solutions or applications that they need, that's where we didn't have that level of capability. So there's no overlap. There's basically just a 1-2 punch in terms of getting the user logged in.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and considering both of our customer bases, we very much are both talking to an enterprise customer base. And so we have never once heard from any of our shared customers, I don't have non-standard applications. That's just a fact of what we deal with. And, with 8,000 customers that you all have on the PAM side, I'm sure that all the time you're hearing these conversations around, where's the source code? How do I do this for this subset of applications? And it may not be just a small subset. It could be half of their applications, could be non-standard apps that are just because of age, they're not speaking modern protocols like OIDC or SAML.
That's right. That's right. So I wanted to point out one quick note about kind of where we could take it farther with CyberArk Identity once you're now past the authentication of that application. You heard at the beginning talk about post authentication. What happens after we've logged the user in? Your average identity provider, right? Like your kind of the usual solutions in the market that provide access management for web apps or applications in general would stop right there. Users logged in. Now you kind of carry on with your usual business. The thing that CyberArk Identity has leaned into is taking kind of the heritage of PAM and some inspirations from the PAM expertise that we've had for the last 25 years and apply it to the workforce. So here's an example, right? You're logging into a non-standard web app, like you guys have been saying, that handles finances or handles operations for the organization. And there's an incredible amount of privilege in those web apps, but the user who's logging in is just a workforce user. It could be you or I. Maybe you need to transact something, or we need to handle some sort of payment, or we need to handle some sort of logistical task inside that application. But those apps, because they're also legacy, may not have the best like reporting and events and monitoring and visibility into what that user is doing, right? They didn't have modern integrations with SIEM products. They may not have had the ability to kind of see what events and tasks or kind of actions that that user is taking. So similar to how you would record a session for a privileged target, we can turn on things like what we call secure web sessions. And what that does is it'll monitor the user's session inside that web app and create an audit trail. And because it's all being done through like a web browser, we can also go ahead and take screenshots of that user's activity and go ahead and then catalog it in like a chronological order as to what that user was doing inside of that web app. And not only can we like create the audit trail, but we've taken it like a couple of steps farther. We can turn off certain controls, like being able to copy and paste, being able to download, being able to upload, being able to also challenge the user for MFA if they were to do a specific action, like maybe transact something. Absolutely. Or save like change a setting. If they were to do that, we can actually black out the screen, challenge the user for MFA, and then if they kind of go through the MFA prompt like normal, then kind of give them control back of the screen. Those are just some examples, actually. There's actually a lot more you can do. But this is, again, like, whereas on the first end of the equation, we can handle the authentication alongside Mavericks to basically give you that end kind of like authenticated session into that web app. But then CyberArk Identity can come back into the fold and protect your session and that user further. So I think that's where kind of like end-to-end security, whereas, just the authentication being kind of the thing in the middle, is really what we're focused on here at CyberArk.
That's awesome. And that's honestly the most delicious outcome we could hope for from this kitchen. I mean, as we're thinking through the process that we just laid out here, I mean, that's exactly what we're hoping for. I think some of that lack of visibility and that lack of audit that you discussed, I think the practitioners in our audience right now probably start getting some cold sweats and realizing, I mean, the worst that can happen is being a victim of something you didn't even know was happening. And those dark corners and those things, the unknown, that's the scary part. And what we're doing here is providing that visibility together for those legacy applications that wouldn't otherwise have that capability.
Yeah, I would really think about kind of the user base, right? Like I've been using us as an example as the workforce, but if you look at kind of common security breaches and incidents that have been happening in the last, like, let's say even the last 6 months, actually a common entry point for like these security incidents and breaches ends up being by way of like B2B users, like external workforce, contractors, vendors, partners, and so on, because they tend to just have less security on the way in, but oftentimes maybe doing something or having access to something that does have a lot of privilege or high risk. So we can apply these types of controls to any type of user, any type of application. And because you've got kind of Strata in the middle also tackling kind of the legacy apps, you're covered on all ends. So I would, again, questions to think about would be like, who are all the types of users that have access to internal like web apps, and then what of those do I not have good visibility into?
Yeah, that's a great call. Well, and you mentioned questions. I was saving this till the end. We had one of our registrants actually posted a pre-call question about this, which was simply, and I'm going to pose it to both y'all because it actually just has to do with policies. And as we think about your legacy WAM protection, as we think, Siteminder per se, you've spent a lot of time setting up those policies to protect those legacy applications. And what we're suggesting now is that we're actually going to replace that WAM protection with CyberArk Identity. Thinking about those policies and how we replicate that level of security, which we're reinforcing with the identity security platform, this story together. Shift Trey, I might start with you. Policies, how do we ensure that we carry this forward?
Yeah, absolutely. So simply put, we can do anything that you could possibly imagine, even those things that your other IDPs or other ecosystem members can't, because candidly, the CyberArk Identity platform is better in security, in simplicity than a lot of its competitors. But then also the partnership with Strata is that we then allow you to extend all of the richness of those policy enforcements into whatever application matters to you most. And so things like doing very fine-grained authorization in and we can be the enforcement point, or we can do the secure web services in parallel with CyberArk, or we can do that exotic thing that is unique to your business or industry, because the Strata platform is based on infrastructure as code. So we're low code, no code. So if you need to do just that unique exotic thing that nobody else does, it's within reach now. And it's within reach without rewriting your application. That I can't overstress that enough, is that it's now within reach for all of your good.
That's it. It's not baked into the app. It's not stuck into the app. What we've done is we've externalized that identity logic from the applications in this process. Because our thoughts about the policy side of things as we think about this identity security platform that we've created together.
Yeah. So I actually just covered like some of the most popular policies and controls that come up, like the audit trail, enforcing of continuous authentication via MFA, turning off certain types of controls like downloads and copy and paste. But you know what, the one that's been coming up a lot recently is knowing what type of authentication is a fit for my organization. So I'll give you an example. When you're setting up MFA policies for, let's say, a mission critical application, like the ones that something like a Strata and CyberArk would be connected to, it's important to like think about the authentication and the access controls like for that app individually. And what we can do inside of CyberArk is you can enforce authentication policies per app, per user, or per role. So as an example, let's say per role, someone like an admin who's logging into some sort of mission critical application, when they do MFA or they do authentication to get to that app, you can actually test to see if your policy will adhere to one of kind of the NIST standards for authentication. So as an example, like there's NIST AAL level 1, 2, and 3. And depending on how mission critical that application may be, or if it's a high risk application with lots of different privileges, or maybe that specific user has lots of privilege, you want to prevent them from logging in from certain locations, certain time of day, certain levels of risk either is tolerable, or you can maybe set it to only low risk situations you can get access to that application. But ultimately, you can also say that if, let's say, the risk is high, challenge the user for a stronger set of controls, like an MFA using a YubiKey. Or maybe if it's low risk, passwordless is okay. If it's high risk or medium risk, I want to be able to do like a push notification on that user's device with a Face ID. So you can set these policies up to be adaptive and dynamic. And then you can also decide that depending on the outcome of what our evaluated risk is, do you need to record the session? Do you need to turn off certain capabilities as well? So it's really kind of what we've leaned into here at CyberArk, whereas, logging you into the app is fine, right? But post authentication and the policies and controls that would be necessary to not only just manage identities, but to secure them more holistically, that's where we're really kind of finding that's where our differentiation lies.
Love it. Well, Kazar, thank you so much for joining us today. This was a blast. We love our partnership with y'all at CyberArk, and I think we're really delivering some incredible value together. As we say often, there's no app left behind. You shouldn't be making decisions to sunset these legacy applications simply because you can't figure out how to protect them with a modern authentication solution like CyberArk. And what we showed today is in just a matter of minutes with configuration. Chef Terry, you walked us through that process. This isn't magic. This isn't hand waving. Even in the demo, we showed that this was all real live stuff. But that's simply how easy this is. And so again, Kazar, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yes, thank you guys.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
Well, as I bring us to the end, we invite everyone to visit the Orchestration Kitchen Hub to take a look at our previous episodes on replay, as well as to see what's coming next. Chef Terry, if they wanted to talk with you specifically a little bit more about this, what should our audience do?
Oh, please do. So there's two basic ways to get your hands on doing exactly what we built here in today's recipe. First one is just go to our get a trial at mavericks.strata.io. Anybody can just sign up for it, and you can get your own working tenant. As I said, with no training at all, we can get you set up and have it orchestrated, deployed in your laptop, and you can do the integrations like we did here with CyberArk Identity today, very simply. Or if you just have questions or one little hand holding or just whatever it may be, feel free to reach out to me directly. My email is terry@strata.io. Would be more than happy to help you. I'll get me or somebody on my team, and we'll help make this real for you.
That's great. Well, Kazar, Terry, thank you both for joining today. I appreciate your valuable time and appreciate our audience joining us as well. We look forward to having you on a future episode. And with that, we bid you adieu and hope to see you next time. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.